In the late 18th century, few could have imagined that a collection of colonies on the eastern edge of North America would one day dominate global politics, economics, and culture. The United States began its journey in 1776 as a fledgling nation born out of rebellion against the British Empire. The American Revolution, though fueled by ideals of liberty and self-determination, was also a pragmatic fight for economic independence. The victory in 1783 secured the young nation's sovereignty, but the path to power was far from clear. The early years were marked by internal divisions, economic struggles, and the challenge of building a functioning government under the new constitution. Yet the foundations laid by the Founding Fathers, federalism, individual rights, and the rule of law, created a political structure capable of growth and adaptation. Throughout the 19th century, the United States expanded its territory and influence at a remarkable pace. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 doubled the size of the country, offering vast lands for agriculture and settlement. This territorial expansion was driven by the belief in manifest destiny, the idea that the nation was destined to stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific. While this vision inspired ambition, it also led to moral and political conflict, particularly over slavery. The Civil War of the 1860s was a defining test. The Union victory preserved the nation and abolished slavery, setting the stage for industrialization and modernization. After the war, the United States entered an era of rapid industrial growth. The late 19th century saw the rise of railroads, steel, oil, and manufacturing industries that transformed the economy. Titans of industry like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan built powerful corporations that made the U.S. a hub of innovation and productivity. Immigrants from Europe fueled this growth, bringing labor and skills that powered the expanding cities and factories. By 1900, the United States had surpassed Britain and Germany as the world's largest economy. The combination of vast natural resources, entrepreneurial energy, and political stability gave America an unmatched advantage. Culturally and politically, the U.S. began to assert itself beyond its borders. The Spanish-American War of 1898 marked America's arrival as a global power. With victories in Cuba and the Philippines, the nation gained overseas territories and influence in the Pacific and the Caribbean. President Theodore Roosevelt's policies further strengthened America's international position. His construction of the Panama Canal and his emphasis on naval power signaled a shift toward global engagement. The phrase, "speak softly and carry a big stick," captured the spirit of an emerging power that preferred diplomacy but was ready to use force when necessary. At the dawn of the 20th century, the United States was no longer just an isolated republic focused on internal. When World War II ended, the United States emerged as a dominant global power with an economy untouched by the destruction that devastated Europe and Asia. The war had lifted America out of the Great Depression and transformed its industries into engines of production capable of feeding, arming, and rebuilding entire continents. With its factories intact and its infrastructure thriving, the United States became the center of the post-war world economy. The dollar replaced the British pound as the world's leading currency, and Washington took the lead in shaping new international institutions like the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. These organizations reflected a vision of stability and cooperation under American leadership. However, peace brought a new kind of conflict. The alliance between the U.S. and the Soviet Union dissolved quickly as differences in ideology and ambition surfaced. The Cold War began, a struggle not just for military supremacy but for global influence between capitalism and communism. The Truman Doctrine of 1947 committed the U.S. to supporting nations resisting communist expansion, marking the beginning of a long era of containment. The Marshall Plan followed, sending billions of dollars to rebuild Europe, not only to restore economies but also to prevent Soviet influence from spreading westward. The Berlin Airlift, in which American planes delivered vital supplies to the blockaded city, symbolized both the tension and the determination of this new global rivalry. At home, the United States experienced an unprecedented era of prosperity. The 1950s saw suburban expansion, technological growth, and a booming consumer culture. Factories that once produced tanks now built cars, appliances, and televisions. The American middle class expanded, and the idea of the American dream became a defining feature of national identity. But underneath this prosperity were social divisions and fears. The Red Scare and McCarthyism reflected widespread anxiety about communist infiltration, while racial segregation and discrimination continued to haunt the nation. The Cold War drove scientific and military innovation. The Soviet launch of Sputnik in 1957 challenged American pride and spurred the space race. The U.S. responded by creating NASA and investing heavily in science and technology. This competition eventually culminated in the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969, when Neil Armstrong's words, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," became a global symbol of American achievement. The Cold War also saw proxy wars fought far from U.S. soil, including in Korea and later in Vietnam. These conflicts tested America's resolve and revealed the limits of its power, especially as public opposition grew against the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 1970s. Domestically, the post-war years were also a period of social transformation. The civil rights movement challenged the deep-rooted injustices faced by AFR. The 21st century moved forward, the United States continued to stand at the center of global power, but its dominance faced new tests. The 2008 financial crisis struck at the heart of America's economic system, sending shockwaves throughout the world. Major banks collapsed, unemployment surged, and millions lost their homes. Yet the crisis also demonstrated the depth of the U.S. financial network. Even in turmoil, the dollar remained the world's safe haven. Through government intervention and massive economic stimulus, recovery began, showing once again the resilience of the American system. The crisis, however, left lasting scars, widening inequality, public mistrust in institutions, and a growing debate about capitalism itself. At the same time, global dynamics were changing. China's rapid rise introduced a new competitor on the world stage. While the United States remained the world's largest economy and military power, China's growth signaled the beginning of a more multipolar world. The U.S. responded by reinforcing alliances, investing in technology, and reasserting its influence in Asia through policies aimed at balancing Chinese expansion. The rivalry extended into trade, cybersecurity, and innovation, with both nations competing for technological supremacy. Despite these challenges, America's cultural and technological influence remained unmatched. Silicon Valley became the epicenter of a digital revolution that transformed daily life across the globe. The rise of social media, artificial intelligence, and mobile technology reshaped communication, entertainment, and politics. American companies and creators continued to shape the global narrative, from Hollywood films to tech startups that defined modern innovation. The power of American culture, often described as soft power, reached far beyond military might, inspiring and influencing people in nearly every country. Domestically, the nation faced deep divisions. Political polarization grew stronger, and debates over immigration, race, and economic inequality intensified. The election of Barack Obama in 2008 marked a historic moment as the country's first African-American president took office, symbolizing progress in the long struggle for racial equality. His presidency focused on recovery from the financial crisis, healthcare reform, and diplomacy aimed at rebuilding America's global image. However, it also revealed sharp political divides that would only deepen in the following years. The 2010s brought new challenges. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan dragged on, consuming resources and testing public patience. Terrorism evolved into new forms, including cyber threats and lone wolf attacks. The Arab Spring brought both hope and chaos, and the U.S. once again found itself navigating the complexities of global change. Meanwhile, technological advancements like renewable energy, electric vehicles, and biotechnology opened new frontiers for American leadership. Yet, the rise